So we're doing the fingers and we're testing the metacarpal phalangeal flexion. So we're going to align the center of the fulcrum up with her metacarpal joint right here, and the distal arm will stay over the dorsal midline of the proximal phalanx, and then we're going to align the moving arm in the dorsal midline of the metacarpal. So she is at 90 degrees. Alright, so we're testing her fingers in the metacarpal phalangeal extension. So we're going to align the center of the fulcrum up over the dorsal aspect of her MCP joint right here. We're going to have the distal arm over the dorsal midline of the proximal phalanx, and then we're going to have the moving arm over the dorsal midline of the metacarpal. So right now she is at 20 and she's within normal range, which is 20 to 45. So I'm doing finger abduction, and we will align the center of the fulcrum over the dorsal part of her MCP joint, so like right in here. We're going to have the distal arm at her proximal phalanx, and then we're going to have the proximal arm over the top part of her metacarpal right here. So we're going to ask her, we're going to have the center of the fulcrum sunny side up. Okay. And then we're going to ask her to have her move her index finger towards her thumb. And then we're going to measure it this way. And she is at 20. Okay, so for measuring the PIP flexion and extension, you would want a cut goni because it will not be able to measure accurately with one of these. So you would still align the center of the fulcrum up with the PIP joint.
Okay, so we are going to do PIP Flexion. So we're going to start with Savannah's finger in extension, and we're going to have the fulcrum at the PIP joint. Okay, so that's like the middle portion. So DIP, PIP, MCP. So it's the middle one. So go ahead and flex. And she is at 105. Okay, so we are doing PIP extension. So we're going to start with the fulcrum at the PIP joint, and you would kind of, if you did the flexion first, you would kind of already have the goniometer positioned in flexion. So go ahead and extend. And she is at 0. Okay, so we are doing thumb carpometacarpal flexion. So the CMC for the thumb is down near the wrist. So we're going to start with the fulcrum right here. We're going to align it with, it's not going to be exactly at a 0 starting point. We're at 30, weren't we? Okay. So for Savannah, we're starting at 30. So then we're going to have her flex her CMC joint towards her pinky. And then we're just measuring that small distance to this joint right here. So she ended up at 15. So that means that she moved 15 degrees since she started at 30. Okay, so we are doing thumb CMC extension. So reminder that the CMC is down here by the wrist at the thumb. So we're going to put the fulcrum there. We're going to align it with kind of the natural alignment of her thumb, which is at about 30. So we're going to have her extend her thumb. And she is at around 60. So since we started at 30, she ended at 60. That means she has 30 degrees of CMC extension. Okay, so we are doing thumb CMC abduction. So we are going to line the fulcrum with the CMC joint, which is down here. We're going to align the stationary arm with the second metacarpal, and we're going to take note of where this distance of the goniometer, or the moving arm, lining up with her thumb. So right now she is already at 15 degrees. 15 degrees. So go ahead and abduct. And she ended up at 60. So she has 45 degrees of thumb CMC abduction. Okay, so we are gonna do thumb MCP Flexion. So we are gonna have her hand with her thumb up. And
normally it would be on the table.
Yes, so we're gonna...
But the Gonio's too long.
So we're gonna put the fulcrum on the MCP joint. So CMC, MCP, IP. So in the middle one. And we're gonna have her flex. So lift it your arm up a little bit higher. There you go. And she is at 75 degrees. Today we are doing thumb metacarpophalangeal thumb MCP extension. So we are going to have her palm up. We are going to put the fulcrum at the MCP joint, and typically this should be 0. So the goniometer should almost just like sit flat on her, meaning 0. Now if they were a little bit hyperextended, you might have to measure a little bit down, but it should be 0. So you shouldn't get much movement at all with MCP extension. Okay, we are going to measure thumb IP flexion. So the IP joint is the end one on the thumb. So we're going to put the fulcrum on that joint, and we want to stabilize these joints below. That way you're only bending your the top part of your thumb. So go ahead and then flex. Okay, I don't know how you're supposed to do this. All right. We got 60. Okay, we are going to measure thumb IP extension. So we are going to put the fulcrum at the IP joint, and we're going to see how, if she can hyperextend her thumb back, right?
You need to stabilize.
Yeah, we want to stabilize the joints underneath the IP joint so you don't get any movement. So this would be like whether or not they have a hitchhiker's thumb. Okay, so extend. So she has 30 degrees. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
Because let me see your thumb. Yeah, that sounds right. So she has 30 degrees of hyperextension.